Hey everybody, welcome back to Why Is This a Podcast? I'm your host, Kieran Watts. Thank you so much for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, we've covered a lot of issues on this show in the time that I've been doing it. We've gone through addiction and mental health with the wonderful Sam Thomas. Recently, we've discussed health a number of times. I'm really grateful today to have the opportunity to talk to a married couple whose charity, Morgan's Wings, does so much wonderful work to support parents through bereavement. Please welcome to the show Geoff and Jude Davies. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Hello, hi, thank you for having us.
Well, pleasure's all mine, and obviously my gratitude is enhanced by the fact that this is obviously very, very difficult for you, for anyone to discuss. And so I'm hoping that it'll be a smooth and sensitive discussion. Let me know if it isn't. You can let me know by telling me directly or throwing something at the screen. But I'm very, very grateful that you're here. I want to start off by asking about just Morgan's Wings, what it is and where it comes from for you both. I don't know who wants to start on that first.
Yeah, I'll start on that one. So Morgan's Wings is a charity that we've set up around about this time last year, January 2020. We suffered a miscarriage in December 2019, and that was baby Morgan. The miscarriage itself was very, very difficult, as you can imagine, and it was actually made worse because it had a very, very bad effect on Jude physically as well, and made her very ill. So it had a huge impact on us, and sort of after that, in January, as we were starting to sort of get over and recover, we kind of identified that there was an issue. It was almost as if the hospital had fixed the physical aspects of what had happened with the miscarriage and sorted all of that out, but then kind of left us to our own devices and said, right, we've fixed you up, off you go, and we felt a bit like we didn't really know where to turn or who to talk to for help. So it was very quickly then after that we decided that we'd set up something, try and do something ourselves to help. So the original actual purpose for Morgan's Wings, we looked at when we were in the hospital. We were in overnight, and we went in suddenly, and we were kept in an overnight unexpectedly, and so we weren't prepared. We had nothing with us. We just went for an appointment, and the next thing you know, we were still there 36 hours later. So we set up Morgan's Wings originally to provide care packages, we call them, to hospitals, so that parents who are there overnight unexpectedly going through a miscarriage can actually have access to things that will make their stay a little bit more comfortable. So simple things like deodorant and wet wipes and a toothbrush and those kind of things that just when you're caught off guard that you don't have. So that was why we originally set up, and then since then it's grown, and we do lots of other things now, like talk support and certificates of life and those kind of things as well. But that was how we started.
One of the things that sort of struck me there was where you mentioned about the care packages. I mean, when it's a traumatic event like that, it's one of those things that sort of I think about sometimes when I hear of similar events. It's like those are like the nitty gritty things that people just don't even think about. Like, at a certain point, say for example, it could be something as ostensibly trivial as I have a house plant that needs watering. If I'm going to be in hospital for several days for an unexpected event, who's going to do that? So I think that's a really important thing that you offer. and also, of course, the emotional support. Jade, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add on that, in terms of why it's so important that couples, individuals who go through these kinds of events, why the support you offer is so vital.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know that they're not alone going through this. There are others that have been through it, and not everyone's experience is going to be the same, but we can relate. We've had we've had 2 miscarriages, both different, but we can relate to what they've gone through. And it's important for us as well that we provide somewhere that's safe for people to come and speak and grieve with us. And like Geoff said, the certificates of life have proven really popular. I think it's so important for people to have something that they can hold, because some miscarriages happen before people have scans, so they've got no pictures, they've got nothing really to remember their baby. So we hope we can offer somebody just something that's important to them and helps them, not that you would ever forget, but helps them have a little memento maybe.
Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, to make the miscarriage more than an event, to make it like a child, a person.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, that's one of the ways, one of the best ways really to deal with what happens with a miscarriage, because I mean, I don't know how it feels for the woman, obviously, but you have that feeling of you've lost a child, and it's not, because when you are pregnant, you have your hopes, you have your dreams, you imagine a life with this baby, and it becomes a person very quickly in your mind, certainly in mine anyway. So it certainly helps to have that acknowledgement that it is or it was a child. I think
right.
The only possible exception to that would be if you didn't know you were pregnant, maybe. And obviously, really early miscarriages, that's the other thing I think that's dawned on us with doing this, is that miscarriage is different for everybody as well. So it can be different for everyone.
So, and obviously the language about it is very, very technical. Most of the language about it is very, very technical. It isn't a reflection of the trauma and of the pain. And as you mentioned earlier, sort of like the feeling that you have to fend for yourself in the emotional aftermath is like, we've addressed the physical damage here. Off you go, and it's sort of that's why I think it's very, very wonderful what you're doing, is that you're plugging that gap there that's in, and we'll come to that gap later on. But one of the things that I found out about your charity, and my researcher as well found out, was that a lot of the site is devoted to addressing like myths about miscarriage. What are those myths? What are you trying to dispel for people?
I think the biggest one is that a miscarriage is like a period, a heavy period, and it's not, or it certainly wasn't in our case. It can be, but when we lost Morgan, it was over a period of just over a week, wasn't it? Yeah. And I ended up in resus. It was really quite bad, and yeah, it was yeah. So that was one of the things. It's it's not always like a heavy period. The emotional side of it as well is horrific. But I think
honesty as well.
Yeah, we wanted to break the taboo around miscarriage. I know in the last year, Chrissy Teigen and Meghan Markle have both spoken out about their miscarriages, and they've had a lot of backlash. I think Chrissy's originally was for sharing the photos on social media, which, they're her photos, they're her baby. She's got every right to share those photos. And Meghan Markle was called an attention seeker because, she wants to move away from the royal family, and then, she's announcing her miscarriage. But I think everyone's experience is different. And I think if they can use their name to help break the taboo, then, and they're doing it, brilliant.
A lot of the thing with with taboos, like, because I've sort of covered public health, including issues similar to this. By no means is it any way similar to going through it, but what I see when it comes to taboo is either you can use it as like a weapon against somebody like Meghan Markle, like you mentioned, to say, oh, it's just attention seeking, but then that, I think, broadly is just a way of avoiding having the conversation at all.
Yeah.
Which is, in my own small way, I'm not trying to virtue signal here, but it's why I wanted to raise this on the show, and I hope it makes some difference. But thank you for what you're doing to make a difference about the taboo about miscarriages. You mentioned that some people get miscarriages where they don't know that they're pregnant, which I think I knew that, but I wasn't sure. But you definitely reminded me about it. So, are there any symptoms that people might miss that they should know about?
I'm not sure if there's symptoms people might miss, but there are symptoms of a miscarriage. That doesn't necessarily mean that people are miscarrying. There's obviously the pain and the bleeding. With both ours, I bled and had cramping around 6 weeks, and had scans from both. And luckily, well, I say luckily because obviously we know things didn't turn out great, but at the time there was nothing wrong. The baby was okay. So there are symptoms that people may think they're miscarrying, but it can be a sign of implantation when the egg's implanting. So it doesn't always mean you're going to have a miscarriage.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we said, medical attention is very, very important to seek, and also in the aftermath as well, to address, as we were saying, the emotional pain, and to reach out to people as you do for with Morgan's Wings. I want to address this question to you, Geoff, because I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a misconception that miscarriage is just something that affects the mother.
Yeah.
And physically, I suppose that's going to be the case, but emotionally, definitely not. Why is it important that both parents are supported in the emotional aftermath of a miscarriage?
Well, it's important that both parents are supported because it affects both parents. You as I sort of mentioned earlier, you have your hopes and dreams and all of that kind of thing, and when that's taken away, that's huge. The way it's different is obviously for the mother, you've got physical symptoms and things like that, which are very different. But in our case, particularly with Morgan, we were very close to losing. I was very close to losing Jude as well. It was touch and go, and I won't go through the full horror story, but there was a very, very rushed drive to the hospital, and like we said, Jude was pushed into recess, and as I said, there was a period when it was very, very close. So for me, then, sort of after that, I had the double sort of side of grieving for the baby that we were excited about, and this was just before our 12-week scan. So that's traditionally that's when you tell everyone. So we were kind of building up to that, getting excited about telling our other children that we were going to have this and all that. And that was gone, ripped away all of a sudden. But also on top of that, I had then the worry of nearly losing Jude, and actually suffered with post-traumatic stress for a long, well, certainly many months after that. I was having flashbacks and nightmares about that scenario, and still do occasionally. So for me, it was worrying about her as well as dealing with the grief. And of course, I mentioned, we do have a household as well. We do have children and family here. And so my job as the dad, and I think many other dads experience this as well, is kind of keeping the rest of the family informed about what's happening, because they'll all be ringing. Jude didn't want to talk to anyone, obviously. She wanted to sort of, isolate for a little while and deal with what happened and physically recover. And so I was having to tell the same stories like 10 times a day. Oh, yeah, she's doing okay today, but better. Da, da, da. Then talk to the next person. Oh, she's doing a bit okay today. And just keep going and do that. So for me, the support I think I needed would have been to deal with the grief and the PTSD side of it, but also support in terms of just keeping the house. I was exhausted because I was doing all these things. I mean, we share everything anyway. We're not sort of one person does the housework.
You're a modern marriage.
Yeah, we share everything anyway. But having the pressure of doing everything on top of worrying about her and dealing with the grief and stuff as well was tricky. So that's, I think, with dads, that's what it's about. And I think the way sort of we in Morgan's Wings have supported dads is it's dead simple really, is we just say if there are any dads who've been affected by miscarriage and they want to have a chat, I'm not a counsellor, but talking to someone who has been through it really helps. And so there's a couple of guys that I talk to that, we just talk about all sorts of things, but just talking to someone who knows how you feel really does help.
You touched on in that answer, Geoff, what I wanted to ask next, which is that there's obviously the professional support or lack thereof, but what about people sort of like in the community level, in like people like friends, family, who know about somebody having had a couple having had a miscarriage? I suppose the question I'm trying to ask is, how best should other people support those they know, and effectively what should they say or not say?
I think initially it's probably a good idea to send a message just to say, I've heard what's happened, I'm thinking about you, I'm so sorry this has happened. You sort of ring them, ask them if they want to talk, because I think, like we said earlier on, people cope differently. Some people want to talk, other people want to try and keep it deep inside. I would encourage people to talk, because by talking you're helping the grief. I think if they've chosen a name for the baby, to refer to the baby by the name rather than when you had your miscarriage. Maybe send a little gift or a card, like we were saying earlier on. People who have miscarriages, they haven't got those mementos, so just something that can recognise their baby, and for you to know that other people are thinking of you and your baby is really helpful. And then I think in the longer term, remembering those special dates, maybe the due date, the anniversary of the baby. We call it the baby's birth because for us that's what happened. We gave birth to our babies, although they were really early on. And as far as saying, the things not to say, it would be those, well, at least you can, you can get pregnant, or you're lucky you've got other children, because none of that is a consolation at all. It doesn't, we know we're lucky we've got children, but it doesn't make that pain any less, does it?
No, you should never start any sentences with "at least" after a miscarriage.
Don't use the phrase "at least."
Yeah, at least you can.
To our viewers, I mean, one of the ones that I've heard, again, as I say, anecdotally, but one of the things that comes up is to not ask, are you going to try again?
Yeah.
I've heard that that's really a really bad thing to say.
I think it's an interesting one. I think I think that's right. As on the whole, I would say yes, that's right. It's not a question that you really should go and ask a couple that have recently had a miscarriage. Sure. Having said that, I think there were times, particularly, and I think in our case, because Jude was so ill with it, there were, we did have a couple of family members and things ask us, but that wasn't out of ignorance, it was out of concern for our health. So it's this slight difference. So I wouldn't say it's a rule, but certainly not. It's not a question you should generally ask. But if you are worried that people have had a miscarriage and they've been really ill as a result of it, then I think then it's maybe not a valid question, but a valid conversation to have with your loved ones and say, because we sort of sat down with our parents, for example, and said, look, we've decided that, well, we decided we were going to try again, and then of course we had our second miscarriage in October of last year, and now we've decided we're not going to try again. And on both of those times, we've had those conversations with our family just to stop them being worried, really, or to make them worried in the first case.
It's obviously, as we addressed earlier, it's obviously very important to be honest. And I suppose, especially with loved ones, it's important to be honest. I mean, I imagine the man on the streets. I wouldn't want that. That's not a question. I think that it's similarly. I think for people who struggle to conceive, who eventually have that wonderful gift of having a child, it's not really appropriate to then say to them immediately, "Okay, you're going to go for a second one." It's almost like dismissive, I think, of.
You never know what's going on in people's lives.
Exactly.
You never know. They could have been having fertility troubles for 10 years before they've had their baby. So it's better to err on the side of caution.
I mean, because I've got a talent other than being a top-notch podcast host.
Of course.
I've got to self-promote a little bit. But other than that, but I've got a talent for putting my foot in my mouth. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask the question, because if somebody a friend of mine who I knew and loved, if it happened to them, and that's why I think breaking the taboo is so important, because it's like, we need to have the conversation, but it has to be had in the right way. It has to be had with sensitivity, with delicacy. I don't mean delicacy as in patronizing, but obviously we need to talk about it in a way that doesn't exacerbate the trauma, that doesn't fuel the pain.
I would add on top of that I think people shouldn't be frightened to talk about it, though. I think it's okay to say the wrong thing if.
I suppose that's how you learn.
Yeah, if it's not out of ignorance, but if it's genuine concern, you say the wrong thing, and then someone says, "Oh, well, actually, we prefer you didn't say that." It's all. So I don't want people to feel like you mustn't say the wrong thing because you'll make it more worse. In a way, it's better to talk about it than not talk about it.
Yeah, it's certainly better to recognise that this happens, because I know in my case, there were a couple of people that just didn't refer to it at all. I've been off work, or I hadn't seen a friend for it was about 2 months, I think, that I was hidden away from the world, and going back into society, if you like, and just people not mentioning anything, that hurts.
Yeah, imagine it like just acting like everything's normal.
I think you're right. I think people need to be delicate with their language, but at the same time, not frightened to just. Even if it's just, "I'm really sorry that happened to you. I don't know what else to say." And then short break. "Did you see EastEnders last week?" Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be. You don't have to go into a big long conversation, but even just acknowledging what happened, saying sorry, and then being a friend is really important.
As you said, there's obviously people are different. Everybody has a different experience with this kind of event. So in your instance, like the birth of Morgan, as you mentioned, it was a combination of maybe withdrawing and then eventually thinking, I want people to feel like they're not alone in this. So imagine that's going to be the same with language. Some people will take something as an insult and others won't. So I guess it's just why the honesty is so crucial here. I suppose the ignorance that people do have about miscarriage, what couples and individuals as well go through with miscarriage, how complex this is. So again, it's why I think Morgan's Wings is so so important. I'm so glad to have you on to talk about it. I was going to ask you, is the support in place working for those who have been affected, and how can it be improved? I think we've covered that fairly fairly a lot in the interview.
Yeah, I think
Just give you any other, if you have any other thoughts on that.
well, I think one of the things I want to, and we want to make sure we do get across, is that, you know, when we say that we didn't have the right support coming out of the hospital, you know, it's not, we're not bashing the NHS. They did what they needed to do, and then, of course, this was pre-COVID, as we have to say now, don't we? But you know, so
I call them pre-COVID era, the before times.
yes, yeah, the before times, yeah. So you know, but then saying that, of course, the second our second miscarriage in October was during, but you know, we're not here to bash the NHS. I think they do the best that they can with the limited resources they've got, and so I think that's an important distinction to make. You know, it's not about, oh, they should have done this and they didn't. It's more they you know, they probably don't have the resources or the time to train people and to do the things that they need to do. So that's the first thing, I think.
It's very rare that it's the fault of the individual NHS worker. I think it's more just generally a lack of resources, lack of funding. So, but yeah, it is important that be clarified. So sorry to cut you off there, but
That's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you know, when I was actually in hospital, you know, all the nurses and the consultants, they were all lovely. You know, I can't fault any single one of them, but it's sort of the ongoing care, I suppose, that, you know, the NHS hasn't got the time or the money to put into ongoing care, because some people cope with it okay, they go, oh well, that was sad, and sort of move on with their lives, and other people are really affected. Yeah.
you know, I've experienced mental health issues for pretty much my entire life, I would say. And you know, I've had good doctors, bad doctors, good nurses, bad nurses, and those who fall in between. I'm not going to name any of them, obviously, but you know, but a lot of the time, the good ones, they'd be like, you know, it would be like, there's a certain point the resources are not there, or like the waiting list is too long, is as long as it is because we don't have the resources there. And so, you know, it's a very, the NHS is a minefield, I suppose, and the way when you have such limited capacity, especially during COVID-19, when you know, we've been, you know, the NHS has been pushed to its limit, and in many cases, I'd say beyond that limit.
Absolutely.
You know,
Not just the NHS, you know, you talk about mental health and those kind of things. I mean, those are taking a dive during lockdown as well, aren't they? So
yeah, exactly.
these are probably even busier than usual as well.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the worst, you know, of all the times for there to be a pandemic. I don't want to make light of it, but in all seriousness, one of my big things is a hope that the issues that were there in the NHS, COVID didn't create those issues, made them worse, but it's just sort of shining a light on the cracks. And my biggest hope is that in the aftermath, in the after times, people in government will say, maybe it wasn't such a good idea that we didn't give our health service the amount of money it needed to function. But then again, I don't have much faith in the government, but I won't. It's been a true joy to talk to you about, despite the difficulty of the subject matter. Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for I think the graciousness with which you've both handled discussing this subject, which, you know, is so deeply personal and traumatic. I want to ask, just before I let you go, about March for Morgan, which is upcoming. I don't know which one of you wants to take the lead on that.
Yeah, we started March for Morgan last year to help us raise some funds, and also to get us out of the house, because after being stuck in the house for 2 months after our miscarriage. We wanted a reason to get out there, and we thought, what better reason than to raise some funds. So I say I think it was I decided that we were going to complete a marathon, but not in a day, because none of us are that fit, but over the month of March. So that's what we did. And we were very lucky that we managed to do it just before everything went into lockdown. There were a few things that we had to cancel. We were going to have our last day at Roath Park, walking around Roath Park, or I was running and you were walking.
I was very fast walking.
Yeah. So we were going to do that around Roath Park, and then have our family and friends there at the end to give us all a big cheer. But obviously we had to cancel that. We still did manage to walk Pen y Fan whilst doing it.
Yeah, just before lockdown.
Yeah.
It was literally, I think, the weekend before the nation went into lockdown. We did Pen y Fan, which was cool.
Yeah. So we are going to do it again this year.
Yes.
In March, obviously March for Morgan. Again, to raise some funds.
So we're trying to get as much sponsorship as we can. We have a Just Giving page, which is on Facebook, that people can go to sponsor us. But also anyone who wants to actually do it themselves, do a marathon throughout the month of March.
I had that issue earlier, and I think
then anyone who wants to do it can do it, and raise your own sponsorship and send that on to us afterwards. So it's designed to be a fun thing that really you can either watch us do and sponsor us to do, or you can do yourselves and raise some money yourself.
Does it have to be marathon or running? Can people do any activity to just?
Well, you ran the marathon. I walked very fast the marathon.
Does exercise have to be involved, is what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, could you eat 26 miles worth of cake, maybe? I'd sponsor you to do that.
Yeah. Run, march, dance.
Yeah.
Jog,
cycle.
Walk, yeah.
With the captain's home, just doing steps in your garden.
Yeah.
We had a Christopher Miles was one of my most recent guests. I think he was my first guest of this year, actually. And he raised a lot of money for a children's charity called Blue Balloons by playing video games. He did a 12-hour live stream on Twitch.
Yeah.
Playing a game, I don't know what I think it's called The Last of Us. He did that, and he raised a fair amount of money. And in some countries, video gaming is considered a sport. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's obviously, I'd encourage anybody out there who was moved by it. I'd encourage you to donate. Or do a sponsored activity yourself. You can find out more details at morganswings.co.uk about the wonderful work that they do, and there'll be a link to the website itself and the Just Giving page in the description of this video, where you can part with some of your cash to donate to a very worthy cause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our plans this year to sort of, we're going to continue to provide care packages, but we want to also now start, we're going to look at memory boxes as well, providing parents with memory boxes to remember their babies that they've lost through miscarriage, because that's something, again, that's missing. So that's something we're going to look to do going forward. So any sponsorship raised and stuff like that would be really helpful to do that.
Well, but I'm not glad that you have to do it. I wish that you didn't have to do it, but I am glad that you're doing it, and I'm rooting for you, and I'm glad that you're physically better, Jude.
Thank you.
And before I go, my deepest sympathies for your loss.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to talk about this and to raise some awareness. Geoff and Jude Davies, everybody. The charity is Morgan's Wings, and the campaign is March for Morgan. participate if you can, and please, if you do, feel free to leave a comment on the video, and we can send that over to them. Thanks both.
Thank
See
you
you
very
next
much.
time.
Thank you for having us.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much.